The stars looked different from inside the Calarian warship. Commander Vexthor stood at the observation window, his 4 eyes studying the small blue planet hanging in the darkness. Earth, the humans called it. Another primitive world, another easy conquest. He had done this 47 times before, and each time the result was the same. The lesser species either surrendered immediately or fought briefly before accepting their fate. His claws tapped against the metal console as he reviewed the intelligence reports. The humans had barely left their own moon. Their ships were slow and clumsy. Their weapons were based on simple chemical reactions and basic kinetic force. Nothing compared to the Calarian shock cannons that could turn entire continents to glass. Nothing compared to their shield technology that had never been penetrated in 200 years of conquest. Lieutenant Jake Morrison sat at his desk in the orbital station circling Earth's moon. He was tired. 3 years of monitoring empty space had made him wonder if he had chosen the wrong career. His coffee had gone cold hours ago, but he kept drinking it anyway. The night shift was always quiet, always boring. At least it had been until now. The screens in front of him suddenly came alive with signals. Dozens of them, all at once, flooding every frequency he was monitoring. His heart jumped in his chest. He dropped his coffee cup and it floated away in the low gravity, spinning slowly as brown liquid formed perfect spheres in the air. He didn't notice. His hands were already moving across the keyboard, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The signals were not natural. They were organized, patterned, clearly intelligent. Jake felt his mouth go dry. This was it. This was what everyone had wondered about for centuries. They were not alone in the universe. Someone else was out there, and they were here right now, in their solar system. He activated the emergency protocol and sent an alert to Earth. Within minutes, every defense station in the system was awake and watching. The military command centers on Earth lit up with activity. Scientists rushed to their laboratories. Government leaders were pulled from their beds and brought to secure facilities. Captain Lisa Yang was in her quarters aboard the Valiant when the alert came through. She had been reading, trying to relax before another routine patrol. The moment she heard the alarm, she dropped her book and ran to the bridge. Her crew was already at their stations, their faces tight with tension and excitement. The Valiant was humanity's newest ship, designed for deep space exploration. It had been in service for only 6 months. Lisa had hoped to use it to explore the outer planets, maybe push beyond the solar system eventually. She had never expected to face alien contact during her command. Her second officer, Stephen Blake, was already coordinating with the other ships in the area. 3 other vessels had changed course and were moving to join them. It wasn't much of a fleet, but it was all they had in position. Everything else was too far away to arrive in time. On the alien ship, Commander Vexthor received confirmation from his sensors. The humans had detected their presence. He was not surprised. He had not tried to hide. There was no point. In a few hours, this world would belong to the Calarian Empire, and hiding accomplished nothing. He composed the message himself, using the translation matrix that had worked on 47 other worlds. The words were simple and direct. Surrender now or be destroyed. Give us your technology. Give us access to your world. Become part of our empire, or become dust floating in space. His communication officer transmitted the message on all human frequencies. They would receive it. They would understand it, and they would do what all the others had done. They would realize they had no choice. Jake Morrison's hand shook as he translated the alien message. The computer did most of the work, breaking down the foreign language and converting it to English. But even with the machine's help, the meaning was clear. His stomach turned as he read the demands. Complete surrender. Total submission. The aliens wanted everything. They wanted Earth's resources, its technology, its people. They were giving humanity one full rotation of the planet to decide. 24 hours to choose between slavery and annihilation. He forwarded the message to Captain Yang and to Earth Command. Then he sat back in his chair and stared at the screen. 24 hours. One single day to save the entire human race or watch it end. On Earth, General Chris Hampton read the message 3 times. He was an old soldier, 62 years old, with gray hair and scars from half a dozen wars. He had fought on 3 continents. He had seen cities burn and armies fall, but he had never seen anything like this. He called an emergency meeting with the Planetary Defense Council. Military leaders from every nation gathered in the secure bunker beneath Geneva. Scientists joined by video link. Intelligence officers provided everything they knew about the alien vessel, which was not much. The ship was big, maybe 3 times the size of their largest carrier. It showed energy signatures that suggested advanced power systems. Long-range scans indicated the presence of weapons, though their exact nature was unknown. And most concerning, there were signs of more ships at the edge of the solar system, waiting. General Hampton listened to the arguments. Some wanted to surrender immediately. Why fight a war they could not win? Others demanded they fight to the last person. Better to die free than live as slaves. A few suggested trying to negotiate, to buy time, to find some middle ground. Hampton said nothing during the debate. He sat quietly, his old eyes studying the data, his experienced mind working through possibilities. Finally, when everyone else had spoken, he stood up and told them his plan. They would do none of those things. They would not surrender. They would not fight recklessly. They would not beg. Instead, they would do something the aliens would not expect. They would go silent. They would disappear. They would make the aliens think they had won, and then, when the moment was right, they would strike with everything they had. The room went quiet. Some thought he was crazy. Others thought he was brilliant. But he was the general, and in times of war, his word was law. The orders went out across the planet. Prepare for battle, prepare in silence. And when the time came, show these aliens what humanity could do when threatened. Jake Morrison received his orders an hour later. Maintain minimal contact with the alien vessel. Stall for time. Give nothing away. He took a deep breath and opened a channel to the Calarian ship. His hands were steady now. His voice was calm. He told them humanity needed time to consider such an important decision. Just a little more time. On the alien ship, Commander Vexthor smiled with his mandibles. Time. They always asked for time. And he always gave it to them. Because time changed nothing. In the end, they all fell. Captain Lisa Yang stood on the bridge of the Valiant and watched the alien ship through the main view screen. It hung there in the darkness, silent and menacing, waiting for humanity's answer. She had read the ultimatum so many times she had memorized every word. Surrender or die. Those were the only choices the aliens were offering. Her communications officer, Danny Fisher, sat at his station running constant scans of the alien vessel. He was young, only 24, and this was his first real assignment. His fingers moved quickly across the controls, gathering every piece of data he could. Energy readings, mass estimates, thermal signatures, anything that might give them an advantage. Beside him, Amy Carter checked and rechecked the Valiant's weapon systems. She was the best weapons specialist in the fleet, which was why Lisa had requested her for this mission. Amy's face was calm, but her eyes showed the tension she felt. Their weapons had never been tested against alien technology. Nobody knew if they would even work. Stephen Blake, the second in command, coordinated with the other 3 ships that had joined them. The Phoenix, the Ranger, and the Explorer. 4 ships total, against an enemy that had conquered 47 star systems. The odds were not good, but they were what humanity had. Back on Earth, General Hampton was coordinating the largest military operation in human history. Every nation had put aside their differences. Every army, every navy, every air force was working together. For the first time in human history, the entire planet was united against a common threat. He stood in the command center, watching dozens of screens showing military installations across the globe. Missile silos were being prepared. Naval fleets were moving into position. Aircraft carriers were launching their planes. And in orbit, dozens of weapon platforms that were supposed to be civilian satellites were revealing their true purpose. Hampton had been planning for this possibility for 20 years. Not alien invasion specifically, but some kind of existential threat that would require every weapon humanity possessed. The politicians had called him paranoid. The media had called him a warmonger. But he had convinced them to fund the orbital defense network anyway, disguised as communications and weather satellites. Now those satellites were powering up their hidden railguns and missile batteries. Each one was equipped with targeting systems that could track objects moving at a significant fraction of light speed. Each one carried enough firepower to destroy a city, and there were 40 of them spread across Earth's orbit. Jake Morrison was still at his station on the lunar orbital platform. He had not slept in 20 hours. His eyes were red and his body ached, but he could not rest. He was humanity's primary contact with the aliens. and every transmission had to be perfect. Lieutenant Nicole Porter had arrived 12 hours ago with her linguistic team. She was the best xenolinguistics expert humanity had, even though until yesterday that had been a purely theoretical field. Now it was the most important job in the world. She sat next to Jake, listening to every transmission from the alien ship. The translation software was good, but it was not perfect. She was looking for nuances, for cultural context, for anything that might give them insight into how the aliens thought. What she found troubled her. The aliens were not just confident. They were arrogant. Their messages showed no doubt, no concern, no respect for humanity as a potential threat. They spoke to humans the way a person might speak to insects, with casual dismissal and absolute certainty of superiority. But she also found something interesting. The aliens were broadcasting on multiple frequencies at once, and not all of them were encrypted. Their military channels were wide open, probably because they assumed humans lacked the technology to intercept them or the knowledge to understand them. Jake and Nicole spent hours listening to those channels. They heard tactical discussions. They heard status reports. They heard the locations and movements of other alien ships. And most importantly, they heard the aliens' plan. This was not just first contact. This was invasion. The Calarian Empire was conducting simultaneous operations in 12 different star systems. They had done this before many times. They had a process, a standard procedure. Arrive, threaten, wait for surrender, occupy. Nicole's hands trembled as she compiled the intelligence report. These aliens had destroyed civilizations. They had turned entire species into slaves. And they thought Earth would be no different. She sent the report to General Hampton. His response came back in seconds. Keep listening. Keep learning. And tell no one outside the command structure. The last thing they needed was panic. On the Calarian ship, Commander Vexthor was growing impatient. 20 hours had passed since his ultimatum, and the humans had given him nothing but stalling tactics. Requests for clarification, questions about terms, delays and more delays. His tactical officer, Sub-Commander Krell, stood beside him looking at the sensor displays. Krell was older than Vexthor, more experienced and more cautious. He had noticed something unusual about the human homeworld. The energy signatures were changing. Power consumption was dropping in the major population centers. Communication traffic was decreasing. It looked like the humans were shutting down, but Krell was not sure if it was surrender or something else. He mentioned his concerns to Vexthor, but the commander dismissed them. Of course the humans were powering down. They were preparing to surrender. They were getting their population ready to accept new rulers. It was a standard response. Krell was not convinced, but he said nothing more. Vexthor was the commander, and in the Calarian military the commander's word was absolute. Still, Krell increased the sensor sweeps and kept watching. On Earth, the preparations continued. General Hampton had ordered a complete communications blackout within 6 hours. Every civilian network would go dark. Every satellite would stop transmitting. Even military communications would be reduced to hardened underground cables that could not be detected from space. The cities were dimming their lights. Not all at once, which would be suspicious, but gradually, as if people were simply going to sleep. Traffic was being reduced. Power plants were lowering their output. To anyone watching from space, it would look like humanity was simply giving up, shutting down, accepting defeat. But underneath that facade, the real work was happening. Troops were moving into position. Weapons were being armed. Targeting solutions were being calculated. Every railgun, every missile, every weapon platform in orbit was being aimed at precise coordinates. Hampton had given them one objective. When the aliens moved closer, when they came within range, humanity would have one chance, one moment to strike with everything they had. There would be no second chance, no opportunity to regroup. It was all or nothing. Captain Yang received her orders at the same time as every other military commander. When the signal came, she was to power up every weapon the Valiant had and fire everything at the designated target. No hesitation, no mercy. The survival of humanity depended on the next few hours. She called her crew together and told them the plan. She saw fear in their eyes, but also determination. Danny Fisher asked if they would survive. Lisa was honest with him. She did not know. But if they died, they would die fighting, and they would take as many aliens with them as possible. Amy Carter actually smiled at that. She had joined the military to protect Earth. She had trained her whole life for combat. And now, finally, she would get to do the job she was made for. Stephen Blake began running simulations, calculating firing solutions, coordinating with the other ships. The Valiant would not fight alone. 4 ships working together could concentrate their fire and multiply their effectiveness. The hours ticked by. The deadline approached. And across the entire solar system, humanity held its breath and waited for the moment to strike. Jake Morrison sent one final message to the alien ship. Humanity needed just a little more time. Just a few more hours to prepare their answer. Commander Vexthor granted the extension with contempt. A few more hours would change nothing. The humans were defeated, they just did not know it yet. He ordered his fleet to begin their approach. 23 ships that had been waiting at the edge of the system started moving toward Earth. Krell watched them come and felt a chill run through his body. Something was wrong. He could feel it. But he was just a tactical officer, and no one was listening to his concerns. The fleet advanced and the silent planet waited below. The silence was complete. Jake Morrison sat in his darkened station and watched his screens show nothing but empty static. Every human transmission had stopped. Every satellite had gone dark. Every ship had powered down to minimal energy. From space, Earth looked like a world that had simply given up and died. His orders were absolute. No communication. No active scans. Nothing that could give away what humanity was really doing. He sat in the darkness with his hands in his lap, forcing himself to stay calm. His heart was racing, but his breathing was steady. He had trained for high-pressure situations, but nothing had prepared him for this. Nicole Porter sat beside him in equal silence. She had spent the last few hours decoding every scrap of Calarian communication she could find. Now her work was done. The intelligence had been sent to every military commander on Earth and in orbit. Now all they could do was wait and trust that the generals knew what they were doing. She thought about her family back on Earth. Her parents in Seattle, her brother in Tokyo, her niece who had just turned 5 years old. Were they safe? Were they scared? Did they know what was happening above their heads? She hoped they were in a shelter somewhere deep underground, away from whatever was about to happen. Captain Lisa Yang sat in her command chair aboard the Valiant, watching her screens in the dim red emergency lighting. The ship was running on minimum power, barely enough to keep life support functioning. They were drifting, pretending to be dead in space, just another piece of debris floating in the void. Her crew sat at their stations in silence. Danny Fisher monitored passive sensors, tracking the alien fleet without emitting any signals that could give away their position. Amy Carter had her fingers resting on the weapons controls, ready to bring everything online in seconds. Stephen Blake coordinated with the other 3 ships using tight-beam laser communications that were almost impossible to detect. The waiting was torture. Every minute felt like an hour. Every hour felt like a day. Lisa had fought in combat before, back during the South China Sea conflict, but that had been different. She had known her enemy. She had understood their capabilities. This was unknown territory, fighting an enemy that had conquered dozens of worlds. But she also knew something the aliens did not. Humans were good at war, terrifyingly good. They had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of killing each other. Every weapon system on the Valiant was the result of countless conflicts, endless innovation in the pursuit of better ways to destroy. The railguns could fire projectiles at a fraction of light speed. The missiles had artificial intelligence guidance systems that could think and adapt. The defense systems could track and destroy thousands of incoming threats simultaneously. And all of it was about to be tested against alien technology for the first time. On Earth, General Hampton stood in the command center and watched the tactical display. 23 red dots were moving through the solar system, heading directly for Earth. His own forces showed as blue dots, spread throughout the orbital space, hidden among the debris and inactive satellites. The weapon platforms were in position. 40 armed satellites, each one carrying enough firepower to level a small country. The aliens had no idea they existed. Their sensors showed only communications and weather satellites, exactly what they were designed to show. Hampton had fought in enough wars to know that surprise was worth more than superior numbers. The aliens were more advanced, their technology was better, their ships were stronger, but they were arrogant, and arrogance was a weakness he could exploit. His staff worked quietly around him, coordinating the thousands of details that went into a military operation of this scale. Timing had to be perfect. Every weapon had to fire within a 2-second window. If they were too early, the aliens would have time to react. Too late, and the element of surprise would be lost. He looked at the countdown timer on the main screen. 30 minutes until the alien fleet reached the designated coordinates. 30 minutes until humanity either survived or fell. He had never felt pressure like this before, and he had commanded operations involving hundreds of thousands of troops. Commander Vexthor stood on his bridge and watched Earth grow larger on his view screen. The planet was dark and quiet, just as he expected. The humans had surrendered without firing a single shot. Pathetic but typical. Most species chose survival over pride. His fleet was in perfect formation, 23 ships moving in coordinated patterns that had been perfected over 2 centuries of conquest. Each ship knew its role. Each captain understood the procedures. This was routine. Krell stood at his station, still feeling uneasy. The silence bothered him. Complete silence. No communications, no power signatures, no signs of activity at all. It was too perfect, too complete. In his experience, defeated populations were chaotic. There were always pockets of resistance, always some fool trying to fight back. This total shutdown was unusual. He ran another sensor sweep, this time focusing on the area around Earth's moon. There were ships there. He could see them on the scans, but they were powered down and drifting, dead in space, apparently abandoned by their crews. That made sense, he supposed. Why waste energy on ships when surrender was inevitable? But something still felt wrong. He expanded the scan, looking at the orbital space around Earth. Dozens of satellites, all inactive. Space debris. Old rocket stages. The usual collection of junk that accumulated around any inhabited world. Nothing threatening. Nothing dangerous. He was about to report his findings to Vexthor when he noticed something odd. Some of the satellites were positioned in a pattern, not a natural pattern, not a random distribution. They formed a grid, evenly spaced, covering the entire orbital approach to Earth. It could be coincidence, but in military operations, coincidence was often something else. He started to mention it to the commander. But Vexthor was already transmitting a message to Earth, a proclamation of conquest, declaring the Terran system now belonged to the Calarian Empire. The transmission went out on all frequencies, broadcasting to a silent world. Krell said nothing. Perhaps he was being paranoid. Perhaps the pattern meant nothing. Perhaps the humans really had given up. He hoped so, because the fleet was now crossing the orbit of Mars, entering the inner system, moving into whatever waited for them in the darkness. Jake Morrison heard the alien proclamation through his headset. The translation came through clearly. Earth was now property of the Calarian Empire. Humanity was now subject to Calarian law. Resistance would be punished with extinction. His jaw clenched. His hands formed fists. But he did nothing, said nothing. His orders were clear. Silence until the signal came. Total silence, no matter what the alien said or did. Beside him, Nicole Porter was crying quietly. Tears ran down her face, but she made no sound. She was thinking about her niece, about the idea of that little girl growing up as a slave to alien masters. The thought made her sick, but it also made her angry. Angry enough to sit in silence and wait for revenge. On the Valiant, Lisa Yang watched the alien fleet approach. They were so confident, so certain of their victory. They had no idea what was waiting for them. She almost felt sorry for them. Almost Amy Carter's fingers hovered over her controls. Just a little longer. Just a few more minutes. Then she would show these aliens what human weapons could do. The fleet crossed the designated coordinates. General Hampton watched the display and took a deep breath. This was it. This was the moment. He pressed the button and gave the signal that would change everything. Across the solar system, in orbit around Earth on the lunar platform, aboard 4 drifting ships, every human weapon came online simultaneously. The silence ended. The ambush began. And Commander Vexthor, who had conquered 47 worlds, who had never known defeat, who believed himself invincible, finally understood what his tactical officer had been trying to tell him. The humans had not surrendered. They had been waiting, and now in the darkness of space they were about to show the Calarian Empire what it meant to threaten Earth. The Valiant exploded into life. Every system powered up at once, flooding the darkness with energy. Captain Lisa Yang's fingers flew across her controls as the ship transformed from a drifting hulk into a weapon of war. The transition took less than 3 seconds, faster than the aliens could react. Amy Carter did not hesitate. Her hands moved with practiced precision, activating the railguns and launching the first volley of missiles. The railguns fired tungsten rods, each one weighing half a ton, accelerated to 60,000 kilometers per second. The physics were simple and brutal. Mass times velocity equals devastation. The first Calarian cruiser never knew what hit it. The tungsten rod punched through its crystalline hull like a bullet through paper. The kinetic energy converted to heat instantly, vaporizing everything in its path. The ship simply came apart, breaking into pieces that tumbled through space, trailing atmosphere and debris. Stephen Blake coordinated with the Phoenix, the Ranger, and the Explorer. All 4 ships fired together, their weapons converging on designated targets. The aliens had superior shields, but those shields were designed to stop energy weapons. They did nothing against solid projectiles moving at relativistic speeds. 2 more Calarian ships died in the first 10 seconds. Their shields flickered and failed, useless against kinetic bombardment. Their hulls shattered. Their crews never had time to understand what was happening. In orbit around Earth, 40 weapon platforms revealed themselves. What the aliens had thought were simple satellites were actually armed fortresses. Each one had been disguised, hidden in plain sight, waiting for this exact moment. General Hampton watched the tactical display as his orbital network opened fire. Railguns, missile batteries, laser targeting systems, everything firing in coordinated patterns. The aliens were caught in a kill box, trapped between the orbital platforms and the 4 ships attacking from the outer system. The Calarian formation broke apart. Ships scattered, trying to escape the ambush, but there was nowhere to go. The weapon platforms had them surrounded, and Captain Yang's ships were cutting off their retreat. It was a perfect trap, executed with brutal efficiency. Commander Vexthor felt his ship shake as something struck the shields. His tactical displays lit up with warnings. Incoming fire from multiple directions. Ships destroyed. Communications breaking down. Impossible. This was impossible. These were primitives, barely capable of leaving their own planet. He shouted orders, demanding his fleet return fire, but the humans were already moving. Their ships were faster than expected, more maneuverable, harder to target. And their weapons kept firing, wave after wave of solid projectiles that his shields could not stop. Krell tried to coordinate a defense, but it was chaos. The humans were using tactics the Calarian databases had no record of. They were not fighting like an inferior species. They were fighting like experienced warriors who understood exactly what they were doing. A second impact rocked the ship. Vexthor saw one of his destroyers explode on the view screen, torn apart by concentrated fire. Another ship went dark, its power systems failing. A third began to drift, spinning out of control, venting atmosphere through massive holes in its hull. He activated the emergency frequency and called for the reserve ships to advance. 15 more vessels were waiting at the edge of the system. If they could just hold out until reinforcements arrived, they could still win this battle. But the humans had anticipated that too. Jake Morrison had been listening to every Calarian communication. The moment Vexthor called for reinforcements, Jake transmitted false orders on the captured encryption keys. Confusion spread through the Calarian fleet as ships received conflicting commands. Nicole Porter helped him refine the false transmissions, making them sound authentic, using the correct military protocols and proper command structure. 3 Calarian destroyers turned away from the battle, convinced they had been ordered to retreat. 2 more collided with each other, trying to follow contradictory maneuvers. The coordination that had made the Calarian Empire so effective was now working against them. Their rigid command structure meant individual captains waited for orders instead of thinking for themselves, and those orders were now being manipulated by human intelligence officers who had spent hours studying their communications. Amy Carter launched another wave of missiles. These were not simple explosives. Each warhead contained an artificial intelligence programmed with one purpose: reach the target no matter what. The missiles dodged, weaved, and adapted their flight paths in real time, learning from each defensive attempt. The Calarian point defense systems tried to shoot them down, but there were too many, moving too unpredictably. Half the missiles were destroyed, but the other half got through, slamming into already damaged ships and finishing what the railguns had started. Lisa Yang watched 2 more alien vessels break apart. That was 9 ships destroyed in less than 5 minutes. The odds were shifting. The aliens still had numerical superiority, but they were disorganized, confused, taking losses faster than they could respond. She ordered the Valiant to focus fire on the command ship. If they could take out the flagship, the rest of the fleet would be leaderless. Stephen Blake agreed and coordinated the other 3 ships to do the same. Vexthor saw them coming. 4 human ships, tiny compared to his massive flagship, closing in with obvious intent. He ordered all weapons to fire on them, but the humans were too fast, too agile. They spiraled and twisted, making themselves difficult targets while maintaining their own firing solutions. The Valiant took a hit from a Calarian shock weapon. The entire ship shuddered and several systems went offline. Danny Fisher reported shield damage and hull breaches on Deck 3, but Lisa kept the ship on course, kept the weapons firing, kept the pressure on the alien flagship. The Phoenix moved in from another angle, its railguns tearing into the Calarian ship's engines. The Explorer targeted the weapon systems, destroying gun emplacements with precise missile strikes. The Ranger hit the shield generators, overloading them with sustained fire, and the Valiant, with Amy Carter at the weapon station, fired a concentrated burst directly at the bridge section. Tungsten rods and missiles converged on a single point, overwhelming the shields through sheer volume of fire. The flagship's shields failed. The hull armor held for a moment, then cracked. Atmosphere vented into space. Internal explosions rippled through the ship as systems overloaded and power conduits ruptured. Vexthor felt the deck tilt beneath his feet. Alarm screamed. The lights flickered and died, replaced by emergency illumination. He tried to give orders, but no one was listening. His crew was abandoning their stations, running for the escape pods, thinking only of survival. Krell was still at his post, still trying to coordinate what was left of the fleet. He looked at Vexthor with something like pity. The commander had been so certain, so arrogant, so convinced of easy victory. Now he was dying, and his fleet was dying with him. Another impact, larger this time. The flagship was breaking apart. Krell grabbed Vexthor and dragged him toward an escape pod. They stumbled through corridors filled with smoke and floating debris. Behind them, entire sections of the ship were being torn away. They reached the pod and sealed themselves inside. Krell launched it just as the flagship's main reactor went critical. The explosion was massive, visible from Earth, a brief new star in the sky that faded as quickly as it appeared. General Hampton watched the flagship die and allowed himself a small smile. The battle was not over, but the momentum had shifted. The aliens were broken, their command structure destroyed, their formation scattered. He gave the order to press the advantage, show no mercy, give them no time to regroup, hunt down every ship and destroy it. Earth would not be conquered today. Earth would not surrender. Earth would fight and it would win. Captain Yang received the orders and relayed them to her crew. The Valiant had taken damage, but it was still operational, still deadly, and there were still alien ships that needed to be destroyed. She targeted the nearest cruiser and opened fire. The battle continued, and the darkness of space was lit by the fires of war. The battle turned into a hunt. The Calarian fleet, once proud and organized, was now scattered across the inner solar system. Ships fled in different directions, some damaged and limping, others still intact but demoralized. They had come expecting easy conquest and found instead a prepared enemy that fought with frightening efficiency. Captain Lisa Yang pushed the Valiant hard, chasing down a Calarian destroyer that was trying to reach the outer system. The alien ship was faster in a straight line, but the Valiant was more maneuverable. Every time the destroyer tried to build distance, Lisa anticipated its moves and cut it off. Danny Fisher tracked 3 more enemy ships on his sensors. All were trying to regroup near Jupiter's orbit, possibly hoping to make a coordinated jump to faster-than-light speed. He relayed the coordinates to General Hampton's command center and to the other human ships in the area. The Phoenix and the Ranger broke off from their current targets and headed to intercept. Stephen Blake coordinated the approach, calculating firing solutions and timing the attack to catch the aliens before they could escape. The mathematics were complex, but the conclusion was simple. The Calarian ships would not be leaving the solar system alive. Amy Carter kept her eyes on the destroyer they were pursuing. It was firing back, energy weapons lashing out across the void, but the Valiant's shields were holding. Human shield technology was not as advanced as Calarian, but it was good enough, and what humanity lacked in sophistication, they made up for in redundancy and robust engineering. She waited for the perfect moment, tracking the destroyer's evasive pattern. learning its rhythm. When it zagged left for the third time, she was ready. A full spread of missiles launched, each one programmed to anticipate the ship's next move. The destroyer tried to dodge, but the missiles had predicted its course. 8 impacts in rapid succession. The alien ship's shields collapsed and its hull ruptured. Atmosphere vented in frozen clouds. The ship went dark and began to drift. Another piece of debris in the growing field of wreckage. On Earth, General Hampton received status reports from across the battle space. 14 Calarian ships destroyed, 5 more damaged and unable to fight, 4 fleeing at maximum speed. The orbital weapon platforms had performed beyond expectations, and the 4 human ships had proven that courage and tactics could overcome technological disadvantage. But the battle was not over. 9 alien ships were still operational and dangerous. The reserves that Vexthor had called for were still approaching from the outer system, and Hampton knew that even in defeat, a desperate enemy could do terrible damage. He ordered the orbital platforms to maintain defensive positions around Earth while the mobile ships pursued the fleeing aliens. No one was allowed to escape. No one could be permitted to return to the Calarian Empire with news of this battle. Surprise was humanity's greatest weapon, and it would only work once. Jake Morrison monitored the Calarian communications with growing satisfaction. The enemy signals were panicked now, filled with confusion and fear. Captains were calling for orders that would never come. Crews were abandoning their posts. Some ships were surrendering, broadcasting pleas for mercy on open channels. Nicole Porter listened to those pleas and felt conflicted. These were living beings, intelligent creatures who were now facing death. But she remembered their original ultimatum, their arrogant demands, their casual assumption that humanity would submit. They had come to conquer, to enslave, to destroy if necessary. Now they were learning what it meant to be on the receiving end. She hardened her heart and continued her work, providing intelligence to the human forces, helping them target and destroy the alien fleet. There would be time for mercy later, after Earth was safe. Right now, survival demanded ruthlessness. The Explorer caught up with 2 Calarian frigates near the asteroid belt. Both ships were damaged, one trailing debris, the other with visible hull breaches. They tried to fight back, but their weapons were operating at reduced capacity. The Explorer's captain, Commander Greg Palmer, gave them one chance to surrender. The Calarians refused. They fired everything they had, energy weapons and missiles, a desperate last stand. Palmer sighed and ordered his weapons officer to return fire. It was over in minutes. Both frigates were destroyed, their crews lost, another lesson in the cost of arrogance. Near Jupiter, the Phoenix and the Ranger engaged 3 Calarian ships that had managed to regroup. This fight was harder. The aliens were working together, covering each other's weaknesses, fighting with the desperation of those who knew they were going to die. The Phoenix took heavy damage, losing half its railguns and suffering a reactor breach that killed 12 crew members. But its captain, Commander Sarah Mitchell, refused to retreat. She brought her ship in close, trading fire with a Calarian cruiser at point-blank range. The Ranger supported her, its missiles overwhelming the alien point defenses. Together, they destroyed 2 of the 3 ships. The last one managed to damage the Ranger's engines before the Phoenix finished it, with a sustained barrage that cracked the ship in half. Both human ships were badly hurt, but they had won. 3 more alien vessels eliminated. The odds kept improving. The Valiant returned to the main battle space and joined the fight against a Calarian battlecruiser that was making a stand near Mars orbit. This ship was larger than the others, more heavily armed, and its captain was refusing to run. It had destroyed 2 of the orbital weapon platforms and was threatening the lunar station where Jake Morrison was still coordinating intelligence. Lisa Yang approached carefully. This ship was dangerous, and the Valiant was already damaged from earlier fighting, but the battlecruiser had to be stopped before it could cause more destruction. She coordinated with 4 orbital platforms, timing their attack to hit from multiple angles simultaneously. The battlecruiser tried to focus on the Valiant, seeing it as the primary threat, but that left it exposed to the platforms. Railgun rounds hit from above and below. Missiles struck from the sides. The battlecruiser's shields flared and held, but they were weakening. Amy Carter watched the energy readings and waited for the moment the shields failed. When they finally collapsed, she fired everything the Valiant had left. The last of their missiles, every railgun that was still operational. Even the point defense lasers turned to maximum power and focused on one spot. The battlecruiser's armor held for 10 seconds. Then it buckled. Then it broke. The ship came apart in a cascade of secondary explosions, each one triggering the next, until the entire vessel was nothing but expanding debris. Lisa allowed herself a moment of relief. Then she checked her ship's status. The Valiant was hurt badly. Multiple hull breaches, half the crew injured or dead. Weapon systems failing, life support running on backup power. But they were alive and they had won. Across the solar system, the battle was ending. The last few Calarian ships were either destroyed or fleeing. The reserves from the outer system had turned around, retreating at maximum speed when they saw what had happened to the main fleet. General Hampton made the decision to let them go. The human ships were too damaged to pursue, and he needed to preserve his forces in case the Calarians returned with a larger fleet. But he made sure Nicole Porter transmitted a message to the fleeing ships in perfect Calarian language. The message was simple. Earth had defeated their invasion. Earth would defeat any future invasion, and if the Calarian Empire wanted peace, they would need to approach with respect, not threats. Otherwise, they would face the same fate as the ships burning in the void. The fleeing Calarians received the message and did not reply. They just ran, faster than their engines were rated for, desperate to escape the humans who had turned their certain victory into devastating defeat. Commander Krell's escape pod was picked up by one of the retreating ships. He was one of the few survivors from Vexthor's flagship. As he was brought aboard and given medical treatment, he thought about what had happened. The humans had been silent, completely silent, and in that silence, they had prepared an ambush that destroyed a fleet that had conquered 47 worlds. They had used tactics, intelligence, and weapons that showed centuries of experience in warfare. Krell realized something that Vexthor had never understood. The humans were not primitive. They were not weak. They were dangerous, perhaps more dangerous than any species the Calarian Empire had ever encountered. And the silence, that terrible silence, had been a warning that no one had recognized until it was too late. Back on Earth, the cities began to light up again. Power returned. Communications resumed. People emerged from shelters to see the debris falling through the atmosphere like shooting stars. The remains of the Calarian fleet burning up as they fell, a light show that marked humanity's first victory against an alien enemy. Jake Morrison finally left his station and went to look out the window at Earth below. He was exhausted mentally and physically, but also proud. Humanity had faced extinction and fought back. They had been silent when words would not help, and they had struck when action was needed. Nicole Porter stood beside him, also looking at their homeworld. She thought about her niece. Safe now, free to grow up in a world that had proven it could defend itself. The price had been high, thousands dead, ships destroyed, but the alternative would have been so much worse. General Hampton addressed. 3 weeks had passed since the battle. The wreckage of the Calarian fleet still orbited Earth, slowly being collected by salvage teams who worked around the clock to recover alien technology. Every piece of debris was valuable, every intact system a window into how the galaxy's more advanced civilizations built their ships. Captain Lisa Yang stood in the repair dock, watching workers fix the Valiant. Her ship had taken severe damage, but it could be repaired. More importantly, the engineers were already incorporating salvaged Calarian technology into the repairs. Better shields, more efficient power systems, weapons that combined human kinetic designs with alien energy principles. She had lost 37 crew members in the battle, 37 people who had trusted her command and died following her orders. Their names were etched into a memorial wall in the ship's main corridor. She visited it every day, remembering their faces, carrying the weight of their sacrifice. Danny Fisher had been promoted to senior communications officer. He was working with Jake Morrison now, analyzing the captured Calarian databases and learning about the galaxy beyond Earth's solar system. What they found was both fascinating and terrifying. The galaxy was full of life, hundreds of intelligent species, dozens of interstellar empires, trade networks spanning thousands of light years, diplomatic alliances and ancient wars. Humanity had been living in isolation, unaware that they were surrounded by civilizations that had been traveling the stars for millennia. But the galaxy was also dangerous. The Calarian Empire was just one of many aggressive powers that expanded through conquest. There were others, some even more powerful, some more ruthless. And now they would all know about Earth, about humanity, about the species that had destroyed a Calarian invasion fleet. General Hampton had been working with world leaders to prepare for what came next. The nations of Earth had united during the crisis, but old tensions were already starting to resurface. Some countries wanted to build massive fleets and claim territory across the galaxy. Others wanted to focus on defense and avoid further conflict. Everyone had opinions and none of them agreed. But Hampton had convinced them of one thing. Earth needed a unified space force, a military organization that represented the entire planet rather than individual nations. After months of negotiation, the United Earth Defense Force was officially created, with Hampton as its first commander. His first priority was building ships. Lots of ships. The Valiant, the Phoenix, the Ranger, and the Explorer were being repaired and upgraded. But Earth needed more than 4 vessels to defend itself. Construction had begun on 20 new warships, incorporating everything humanity had learned from the battle and from studying Calarian technology. Jake Morrison was given command of a new intelligence division. His job was to monitor all communications coming from deep space and to learn everything possible about humanity's neighbors. He worked closely with Nicole Porter, who had become Earth's chief diplomatic advisor despite having never actually met an alien face-to-face. Together, they had translated the Calarian databases and created profiles on the major galactic powers. The Calarians themselves were a mid-tier empire, aggressive but not especially powerful compared to some of the others. Their defeat would not go unnoticed. Nicole was particularly worried about something she found in the databases. The Calarians had been working for someone else. The invasion of Earth was not their own idea. A more powerful species called the Fourth Hand Collective had paid the Calarians to test humanity's defenses and report. Back on their capabilities, that meant someone out there was specifically interested in Earth, someone who wanted to know if humanity was weak or strong, primitive or advanced. And now they had their answer. Humanity was strong. Humanity was dangerous. The question was whether that would make them leave Earth alone or make them more determined to conquer it. General Hampton took the news seriously. He ordered the construction schedule accelerated and began planning defensive strategies for scenarios Nicole outlined. Earth could not afford to be caught by surprise again. Meanwhile, the salvage teams made a significant discovery. One of the destroyed Calarian ships had contained a functioning faster-than-light drive. The technology was damaged but intact enough for human scientists to study. If they could reverse engineer it, humanity would no longer be confined to their own solar system. The Phoenix's captain, Sarah Mitchell, volunteered to lead the first expedition beyond the solar system once a human FTL drive was ready. She had lost friends in the battle and wanted to make their sacrifice mean something. She wanted to explore the galaxy, find allies, and make sure Earth never faced invasion alone again. Amy Carter had returned to Earth to help train new weapons officers for the expanding fleet. She taught them everything she learned during the battle: how to target weak points, how to coordinate fire with other ships, how to stay calm when death was seconds away. Her students listened intently, knowing that their teacher had faced the aliens and won. Stephen Blake was promoted to captain and given command of one of the new ships being built. The vessel was named the Defiant, a name chosen specifically to send a message to anyone watching Earth. Humanity would not submit. Humanity would not surrender. Humanity would defy any threat to its existence. The Calarian Empire itself was in chaos. The loss of an entire fleet had shaken their government. Vexthor had been considered one of their best commanders, and he was dead. His flagship destroyed by primitives who were not supposed to be capable of resistance. Commander Krell had filed his report, describing in detail how the humans fought, how they used silence to set a trap, how they coordinated multiple weapon systems with perfect timing, how they adapted and learned during the battle. His superiors read the report with growing concern. Some Calarian leaders wanted revenge. They proposed sending a larger fleet to crush Earth and erase the stain on their honor. But others, wiser and more cautious, argued against it. The humans had defeated 23 ships. How many could they defeat if they had time to prepare? How many Calarian lives were worth this conquest? The debate continued, but no decision was made. For now, the Calarian Empire would watch and wait. Perhaps the humans would remain in their system. Perhaps they would be content with their victory and not seek further conflict. Perhaps the problem would solve itself. Krell knew better. He had seen the determination in humanity's tactics. He had witnessed their willingness to sacrifice. These were not a species that would hide in their corner of the galaxy. These were warriors, and warriors always sought new challenges. On Earth, life slowly returned to normal. The orbital debris had been cleared. The damaged buildings had been repaired. The economy was recovering from the brief period of total mobilization. But nothing was truly the same. People looked at the night sky differently now. They knew they were not alone. They knew there were threats out there. Civilizations that saw humanity as primitives to be conquered or resources to be exploited. But they also knew they could fight back. They could win. Nicole Porter stood in her office looking at the star charts on her wall. She had marked every known civilization within 100 light-years of Earth, potential allies, probable enemies, unknown variables. Her job was to navigate humanity through this new reality, to build relationships that would keep Earth safe. She thought about first contact and how badly it had gone. The Calarians had approached with threats and arrogance. The next species to visit Earth might be different. They might come in peace, offering trade and friendship. Humanity needed to be ready for that possibility too, ready to be diplomats and not just warriors. Jake Morrison sent out humanity's first deliberate message to the galaxy. It was broadcast on frequencies known to be monitored by multiple civilizations. The message was simple and direct. Earth was aware of the galactic community. Earth was interested in peaceful contact and mutual cooperation. But Earth would defend itself against any threat with all available force. The message was sent in multiple languages, including Calarian, using Nicole's translations to ensure accuracy. Then they waited to see if anyone would respond. General Hampton knew the response might take years. Space was vast, and even traveling at light speed, messages took time to cross the distances between stars. But eventually someone would answer. Someone would test humanity again, either with friendship or force, and when that happened, Earth would be ready. Not silent this time, but not aggressive either. Ready to talk, ready to trade, ready to build alliances, but also ready to fight if necessary, ready to show the galaxy that humanity had earned its place among the stars. Captain Lisa Yang returned to the repaired Valiant and took her ship out for trials. The vessel handled better than before, faster and more powerful with the incorporated alien technology. She ran through combat drills with her new crew members, training them to the same standard that had won the first battle. As she guided the ship through a series of high-speed maneuvers, she thought about the future. Humanity was no longer confined to Earth. The galaxy was open to them now, full of wonders and dangers in equal measure. Her children would grow up knowing alien species existed. Her grandchildren might travel to distant stars and walk on worlds humanity had not yet discovered. But for now, her job was simple. Protect Earth, train her crew. Be ready.